has his YouTube channel where all this material will be available. Now, I would request Professor Shrikant Bahulkar. We are also happy that Professor Bahulkar has been associated with Professor Dharfale for many years, many long years, and they have a special bond between themselves. And today he is here. I'm also happy to share with you that recently Professor Bahulkar has also received Shri G. Mazgaonkar Award of the Rachim Dhere Trust and the Rajahans Prakashan. In April, he also received the prestigious senior fellowship of the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies. And he's here with us to introduce Professor Madhav Deshpande. So without now sparing more time, I would request Professor Bahulkar to introduce the chief speaker for today.
Friends, I am very happy to be with you this morning for this occasion of on the occasion of the release of the collected works of Professor Dharfale. Professor Dharfale
Yeah.
Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yes. No, please.
Okay.
Please. Please, sir, please. Please continue.
I would like to speak a few words about Professor Dharfale, whom I always consider as my guru. Although, is it okay? Can you hear me?
No.
No?
Yes.
Okay, okay. From SP College. Fond of cutting jokes. And he would enjoy my jokes. I would enjoy his jokes. But that apart, I used to read his articles, and my classmates who were in Ferguson College, they would speak very high about him and mention his wonderful articles. I remember that sometimes one of my colleagues spoke very highly about him and mentioned one of his articles, Shakuntalecha Adharoshtha, and many other things. When I was in the university Sanskrit department, he used to come to the department to teach Pali. At the same time, he would take students to Ujjain for Kalidas Mahotsav and elocution contest. And I remember that these students whom he guided always had got the award first or second, and continuously it was like that. So the people in Ujjain, they will call him Professor Dharpade and something like that. But he was very popular, not only among his students, but colleagues, and all over India. I used to go to All India Oriental Conference, where people would appreciate his talks, his papers, and so on. We were together also in Bhandarkar Institute. He was a secretary, and I was taking care of some academic matters. And I also came to know about his skills, his scholarship, as well as his teaching skills, and also his skill as an administrator. Now, I would speak a few words about my senior friend, Professor Madhav Deshpande. He is my Guru Bandhu. We studied Sanskrit at Tilak Maharashtra Vidyapith, and he was a student of Sanskrit grammar and scholar of Sanskrit grammar. He would very religiously go to Tilak Maharashtra Vidyapith and study Sanskrit grammar with our teacher, Professor Bhagwat Shastri. I remember that he would go there around 8 o'clock in the night and sleep on the table of that library, the big tables. And he would get up early in the morning around 5 o'clock, and our teacher Bhagwat Shastri would teach him Sanskrit grammar. I also joined Tilak Maharashtra Vidyapith, and I started the practice of going to in the night and sharing the table like him, but I never studied Sanskrit grammar with Professor Bhagwat. But I always considered Madhav as my senior friend, and he always loved me. I had read a number of articles, very interesting articles written by him, and I don't have to read out his CV or biodata. Many people who are present here and also who have joined this program online, they know him very well. But I have a special bond with him, and these days we are a member of our WhatsApp group Chhando Ruchi, where Madhav is uploading at least one verse every evening, and this is a pleasant discovery, I should say, that I never knew he was so good at composing Sanskrit poems. And he's a very good scholar, good orator. I always listen to his talks online these days on variety of subjects. And as I said, he's a very good poet, and the choice of words is remarkable. So I enjoy his talks and his Sanskrit poems. I welcome him, and I think I don't have to say much about him. I'm just this much personal. The introduction, his introduction on personal level would be sufficient, I suppose. Thank you very much.
So, thank you very much. Now, I would like to request Professor Madhav Deshpande to deliver the first Professor M.G. Dhadphale Memorial Lecture. And everybody would agree with me that there won't be a better person than him to deliver this first talk. So I now request Professor Deshpande to start his talk.
Thank you, Mahesh. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Okay. हा कार्यक्रम इंग्रजीत होईल अशी माझी समजूत होती, त्यामुळे मी माझं व्याख्यान इंग्रजीमध्ये लिहून काढलं. लिहून काढायचं कारण, लिहिलं जर नाही तर मला 15 मिनिटं बोलायला सांगितलं तर मी 1 तास बोलतो. त्यामुळे ते लिहून ठेवलं की त्याच्यावरती एक मर्यादा पडते, आणि ते लिहून मी ठराविक वेळामध्ये कसं संपवायचं त्याचं आधी प्लॅनिंग करू शकतो. तेव्हा मी माझं व्याख्यान इंग्लिशमध्ये करणार आहे. परंतु व्याख्यान सुरू करायच्या आधी मी भर्तृहरीच्या एका श्लोकाने सुरू करणार आहे. तोयई रल्पई रपी करुणया भीमभानौ निदाघे मालाकारं व्यरचि भवता या तरोरस्य पुष्टिः सा किं शक्या जनयितुमिह प्रावृषेण्येन वारां धारासारानपि विकरता विश्वतो वारिदेन. I have a little bit of cold, so you will hear me coughing sometimes. So you will have to excuse me. So it is my absolute delight and honor to be invited to deliver this first Professor Dhadphale Memorial Lecture. Ever since my first year at Ferguson College in 1962, till I completed my master's degree at the University of Pune, Professor Dhadphale taught me different subjects, and with him I studied various texts in Sanskrit and Pali for 6 consecutive years. Recalling his Uttaram Charita class still brings tears to my eyes. When I joined the Ferguson College as a first-year student, Professor Dhadphale had recently joined its faculty. Very quickly, I became not only his student, but he accepted me as his young friend. As the Dhadphale residence was close to my home, I frequently visited their home, and he visited my family. Our relation became so close that I became a part of the Dhadphale family. I remember that once he asked me to accompany him to Satara on a visit to Mrs. Dhadphale's parents. And he said, how can he go alone without me? I mean, he was going to his in-laws. I said, no, you have to come with me. And so it was a kind of a fun trip for me. And so he treated me like I was his younger brother. I was Madhav Dada to Shruti and Rutavari, and this relationship continued all through my life in Pune. The Dhadphale family was among the friends and relatives who came to see me at the Pune train station in 1968 as I was leaving to go to Philadelphia to do my PhD. So Shruti was there. Shruti was sitting on my lap in one of the photos. So I have that photo somewhere. I'll find it and send it to you. Despite the physical distance between America and Pune, his close relationship continued. I was overwhelmed some years ago when Professor Dhadphale dedicated one of his books to me, a student. This is probably the first instance I know when a teacher dedicates a book to the student he loves so much. During my teaching at the University of Michigan, I continued to read Pali, Sanskrit, and Buddhist texts, and I always remembered my college days studying these things with Professor Dhadphale. During all my visits to Pune, I could never leave Pune without visiting the Dhadphale family, and they visited our home in Michigan a few times. Professor Mohan Dhadphale was not just my professor, but almost my elder brother and my best friend, and I miss him very much. So I'm truly delighted to deliver his first memorial lecture to honor his memory. So let's begin with the socio-linguistic attitudes in pre-Buddhist India. We will briefly review the socio-linguistic situation prior to the emergence of Jainism and Buddhism in ancient India. The literary record of India begins with the Rig Veda, which is primarily a collection of hymns in praise of Arya divinities composed by various priests who served different Arya clans and their kings. Certain Arya clans gradually moved into India from the northwest around the middle of the second millennium BC. At the time they entered India and encountered the indigenous peoples, whom they referred to as Dasas, Dasyus and Panij. Their socio-linguistic attitudes were fairly simply expressed. Though they had already confronted and perhaps partially converged with the non-Arya peoples in Central Asia and on the borderlands of India, and there is a pervasive notion of their own ethnic identity as Aryas. They glorified their Arya language as being divine and produced by the gods themselves. The Arya generally looked at the mass of non-Aryas, and here are the descriptions from the Rig Veda of these non-Aryas as Adeva and Ayaju, that they didn't worship the same gods, they didn't perform the same sacrifices. They are Mura Deva, probably they worship gods that didn't speak, the Murtis perhaps, and then they are called Shishna Deva, the Linga Pujakas of those times probably. And those whose language was obscure and unintelligible to the Aryas. So these people, other people, are called Mrudhravacha. The languages used by the non-Arya were seen as languages that would not please the gods of the Aryas, and hence they are seen to be ritually inferior. As the Vedic Aryas gradually moved into the interior of India, they began adjusting themselves to the local scene and living amidst the local populations. Through contacts and convergence with the non-Arya languages and through internal propensities of their own, the old Indo-Aryan language of the Vedic texts slowly became archaic, and it was gradually replaced by newly emerging forms of Sanskrit and vernacular languages, mainly the Indo-Aryan languages. This probably forced the Aryas to look at their own sacred Arya language and their own current form of language more carefully. The end of this stage is marked by the great grammarian Panini around 500 BC. Panini calls Sanskrit simply bhasha, language. He makes a distinction in his grammar between bhasha, the colloquial spoken language, and chandas, the language of the Vedic texts. To be more specific, Panini views these two domains as two distinct subdomains of a unified Sanskrit language. While literally the term bhasha stands for language, in fact, it actually seems to refer to the language of the upper classes of the society, primarily the language spoken by the Brahmins and male Brahmins at that. We know relatively little about what other classes in society spoke at that time. According to Puranic records, Panini was contemporary of a king named Mahapadmananda, famously described in the Puranas as a Shudra who destroyed all true Kshatriyas, members of the warrior and kingly class, who according to Brahmanical notions alone were fit to be rulers. Mahapadma is described Parashurama Eva Akhila Kshatrantakari. To speak of Kshatriyas being destroyed by these so-called Shudra chieftains probably refers to their mixed origin and or their non or anti-Brahmanical attitudes. At any rate, as these allegedly Shudra rulers became powerful empire builders, their dialects, their languages must have gained in prestige. This period roughly corresponds to the rise of Buddhism and Jainism, and the insistence of these two faiths on using the local languages preference to Sanskrit may be related to socio-political changes of this kind. These founders, the founders of these two major religions, the Buddha and Mahavira, both came from the eastern Kshatriya clans that lie outside the ancient Brahmanical region of Aryavarta. The Maurya dynasty, which arose in this region, showed distinct preference for Advaitism, Buddhism, and Jainism. Chandragupta is said to have become a Jain monk towards the end of his life. During the reign of Ashoka Maurya, Buddhism received royal patronage and it spread all over India and Sri Lanka. Now, coming to later sociolinguistic perspectives, Dandin in his Kavyadarsha says, and I quote, Abhiradi Giraha Kavye Apabhramsha iti smritaha Shastreshu Samskritadanyat Apabhramshataya Uditam. In literature, the languages of Abhiraj, etc., are considered to be Apabhramsha. On the other hand, in the Brahmanical Shastras, such as Sanskrit grammar, anything other than Sanskrit is labeled Apabhramsha or a substandard form of language. Now, would it be appropriate to assume that the low prestige for Prakrit, as it is sometimes described by Sanskrit grammarians, was universally acknowledged in ancient India? This would be analogous to the question concerning the prestige, relative prestige of Brahmanas and Kshatriyas at that time. Would it be appropriate to say that the higher status of the Brahmanas was universally acknowledged by Kshatriyas in ancient India? Now, this question, as we shall see, has central bearing upon the linguistic and social relations and tensions between early Buddhism and traditional Brahmanism. In a Brahmanical text, such as the Shatapada Brahmana, there is interesting evidence of an ambivalent perception. And I quote from Shatapada Brahmana. It says, Brahman verily was all that existed in the beginning. It being alone was not powerful enough. Tat na vyabhavat. Therefore it created Kshatra of an excellent form. Shreyo rupam atyasrujata kshatram. Therefore there is nothing beyond that Kshatra. Tasmad kshatrat param nasti. Therefore, a Brahmana takes his seat below the Kshatriya at the Rajasuya sacrifice. Tasmad Brahmanaha Kshatriyam adhastad upaste Rajasuya. He, the Brahmana, bestows that glory only upon the Kshatriya. This Brahmana is the birthplace of Kshatra. Tadetat Kshatrasya yonihi yat Brahma. Now one can clearly see in such a passage two concurrent images fused together. The physical fact is that the Brahmana priest sat below the king in the ceremony of Rajasuya, as he obviously sat at below the king at the court. This shows the true socio-political hierarchy. However, the Brahmana priest, in his own cosmological speculations, raises himself above the king and derives the essence of kingship from his own Brahmanical essence. The Brahmana, in his own opinion, thinks that he is the kingmaker. It is he who bestows kingship on this Kshatriya, without whose legitimizing force a king would not become a king. Thus, the Brahmana who sat below the king thought that he must actually be superior to that king. The Buddhist and Jain texts of the early period provide us a counterbalance to such a Brahmanical perspective. They provide us primarily a Kshatriya perspective. Both of these religions, Jainism and Buddhism, arose in the northwestern regions, which were beyond the pale of Brahmanical Aryavarta. And both these movements initiated by Kshatriyas rather than by Brahmanas. The northeastern regions such as Magadha were Brahmanized relatively very late, and in these regions the power of Brahmanism remained relatively weak. Thus it is reasonable to expect the Kshatriya-led revolts against Brahmanism to manifest in these regions. The boundary between the pure Brahmanical regions and the non-Brahmanical region slowly the boundary moved further in the eastern direction. The early Brahmanical literature exhibits an opinion that the best speech is spoken only in the northwest. We find passages like Dichamha Vaidishi Prajnatatara Vak Udyate Dichamha Vayanti Prajnatataram Bhasham Shikshitum. Now the low opinion about the Magadhan people and their customs is evident from references to the role of Mahagadha and Pumshali in Atharva Veda and some Vedic ritual. The Vedic literature mostly does not present to us the voice of Magadha itself, but only about what others thought about this Magadhan region. Now turning to what we see in Buddhist texts. In early Buddhist texts, all evidence points to the fact that the Buddha used his own Prakrit dialect from Magadha. Whether it was Pali or not is still a debated issue. But he used his own local dialect to teach his doctrine. One of the obvious reasons is that he wanted to reach the masses, and this he could have done only by using the local dialects to address his audiences. The Buddha claims that his doctrine is for the benefit of the masses. It is Bahujana Hitaya, Bahujana Sukhaya. BC law cites the Arana Vibhanga Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya, and it says, now a man of a particular locality, when he is in other localities where different names of the same things are in vogue, knowing that the usage differs, uses different names in those localities without any attachment to his own dialect. This suggests the Buddha's preference for local dialects for teaching his doctrines. The Buddha claimed to be an Arya. He claimed to represent the Arya way of life, as can be seen from dozens of expressions in Buddhist canonical texts like Arya Dhamma and Arya Magga, Arya Puggala, and so on and so forth. Now, in all these cases, the word Arya may be generally interpreted to refer to some notion of nobility, but it's clearly a loaded word, and it seems to represent an attempt on the part of the Buddha to create and assert a counter, a new conception of Aryahood to combat the conservative conception held in the Brahmanical circles. On the higher philosophical plane, the Buddha totally rejected hereditary caste ranks. But on the lower social plane, the Buddha asserted a social hierarchy different from that of the Brahmanical belief. He clearly asserts that Kshatriyas are socially superior to Brahmanas. And here is a famous verse in Pali. It says, Khattiyo Setho Jane Tasmim Ye Gotta Paticharino Vidyacharana Sampanno So Setho Eva Manuse. There is clear evidence in canonical Pali texts to show that there was great tension between Brahmanas and Kshatriyas, and they held essentially opposing conceptions about each other's social prestige. At the beginning of the famous Mahaparinibbana Sutta, the Magadhan king Ajatasattu is depicted as being desirous of attacking and destroying the Vajjis. He calls his Brahmana minister Vassakara and says, "Come, O Brahmana, and go where the Lord Buddha is. Having approached the Lord, salute the feet of the Lord with my words, and then say, O Lord, the Magadhan king Ajatasattu, the son of the princess of Videha, is desirous of attacking the Vajjis." In the original passage, the king uses the forms Tvam and Upasankama Vadehi, second person forms, to refer to his Brahmana minister. For the Buddha, he uses Bhagavat. Now, when the Brahmana approaches the Brahmana twists the words of the king. The Brahmana goes to the Buddha and says, "O Gautama," not Bhagavat, "O Gautama." At the end of his interview with the Buddha, the Brahmana minister says, "Now, O Gautama, we must go. We are very busy. We have a lot of work to do. Bahu kicha mayam, bahu karaniya mayam." The Brahmana uses his second person singular form for the Buddha, but he uses a first person plural honorific to refer to himself. Then watch the Buddha's response. The Buddha says, "Oh, you Brahmana, go wherever you think the time is appropriate for." The Buddha uses a second person form Tvam to refer to this Brahmana minister. The Brahmana and the Buddha clearly held opposite socio-linguistic views about each other's prestige. The Ambatta Sutta of the Digha Nikaya contains the Buddha's dialectic, which argues that socially the Brahmanas are lower than Kshatriyas. The Buddha argues that if there is an intermarriage between a Brahmana and Kshatriya, the Brahmanas will accept the child of that marriage as a Brahmana and will teach him the Vedas. But the Kshatriyas will never admit such a child to kingship. So, the Buddha says, among people who are concerned about birth, the Kshatriya is always superior. In the Ambatta Sutta, the Brahmana Ambatta is complaining to the Buddha that Brahmins are superior to the rest of the Varnas, and yet, for some reason, the Shakyas don't seem to respect the Brahmanas. The Buddha says, well, what is this order of the Varnas? And in the mouth of Ambatta, the order is placed as Khattiya, Brahmana, Vaishya, and Sudra. And then, of course, it's like a laughing order. A Brahmana saying Khattiya, Brahmana, Vaishya, Sudra. And Buddha said, look what you said. You put Kshatriyas above Brahmanas. So why should the Kshatriyas pay respect to Brahmanas? Now, we might think that this order is kind of just occasional, just in one sutta. It repeats in numerous such suttas. In Pottapada Sutta, for example, Buddha talks about a person who is in love with a village girl. And he says, how crazy is this boy? He doesn't know anything about this girl. He doesn't know whether this girl is a Khattiya or Brahmani or Vaishya or Sudra. Again, the order is Khattiya, Brahmani, Vaishya, and Sudra. Okay. And Mahaparinibbana Sutta talks about 8 assemblies. And again, the list of assemblies begins with Khattiya Parisa first, then comes Brahmana Parisa in that order. Now, something interesting we see here, that in both of these orders, whether it is Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, or Kshatriya, Brahmana, Vaishya, Shudra, the Vaishya, Shudra are still listed beneath these two. What that means is that while these two groups are contesting for prestige among themselves, they both looked at other groups as being kind of lower in prestige compared to their own prestige. That's something interesting to note there. Now the Buddha advises his monks that they should teach the doctrine in Sakaya Niruttya. And this phrase, Sakaya Niruttya, so is Swakaya Niruttya. But then what exactly does this Swa refer to? In recent research on this topic, there's a whole debate about what exactly this Swa refers to. Does this Swa refer to Swa of the Buddha? Does it refer to Swa of the monk? Or does it refer to Swa of the audiences? And so all these three possible alternatives have been discussed in modern research. And there is no complete agreement on what exactly this thing refers to. But there are the three alternative views. Now, there is a passage where we are told that the recently converted Brahman monks go to the Buddha and say that these other monks who don't speak properly, they make mistakes of gender and mistakes of grammar, they are going to ruin your teachings. So please allow us, the Brahmin monks, to rewrite your teachings in Chandas. So Chandasa, Aropema. Please allow us to convert your teaching to Chandas. So the language of the Vedas, the language of Sanskrit, some form of Sanskrit, they are asking. And if you look at the concern of the Brahmin monks, they are particularly referring to the other monks. The monks were not Brahmins making mistakes of gender and grammar and so on. Again, they are talking about Prakrit languages used by those other monks. And so, again, Brahmins converted to Buddhism still were looking at other monks as kind of non-Brahmin monks as making mistakes. And they hoped that the Buddha would allow them to rewrite his teachings in Sanskrit so that such mistakes will not be made. Now, the early texts say that the Buddha did not allow such things. That the Buddha said, no, you cannot allow the Chandasa Aropema. It's not acceptable to me. Sakaya Niruttya, go and teach in your own, again, either the dialect of the monk or the dialects of the audience. Now, let's for a brief moment look at what we see in Puranas. On the other side, how is Buddhism and the Buddhists are viewed by its opponents. So, in the Puranas, they generally do not deal with the question of language, but they point to post-Mauryan attitudes among the Hindus. Again, the word Hindu is anachronistic. We know the word was not used at the time of Puranas. The main feature of this Puranic evidence is that it elevates the Buddha to the status of an incarnation of Vishnu. This particular theme, this particular incarnation of Vishnu, it asserts that Vishnu appeared as the Buddha, not to teach proper doctrines to good people, but to teach false doctrines to demons, to asuras, so that the devas defeat the asuras. So it's a kind of a very funny twist. On the one hand, Buddha is accepted as an avatar of Vishnu to be worshipped, but the role of the Buddha is given in this kind of a tongue-in-cheek or some kind of a very interesting way. The Buddhist doctrines are still not acceptable because they were designed to misguide the asuras so that the devas could defeat the asuras. The Puranas also, when they talk about the history of the kings, beginning with this Mahapadma Nanda, as I mentioned previously, they say that the pure Kshatriyas come to end with Mahapadma Nanda. It says Nandantam Kshatriya Kulam, and Itah Prabhuti, from here onwards, Shudraha Bhupala Bhavishyanti. So Mahapadma Nanda, the Mauryas are called Shudras, and several other other contexts and so on. So again, it's not something that we need to debate whether they were Shudras or not. These are opponents of the Mauryas, calling them Shudras. So this is name calling of a certain kind in ancient India. To look at some other opponents of the Buddhists, the Mimamsa. Briefly, let's look at what Mimamsakas have to say. We have something in Shabara and Kumarila. While Jaimini does not refer directly to Buddhism, one can make certain hypotheses regarding the Mimamsa position on language. The Mimamsa view of the Vedas is that the Vedas are not human creations. The Vedas are apaurushaya. They are not created by anybody, let alone human beings, not even by gods. They were never created. So the word apaurushaya is sometimes seen in a limited meaning, that they were not created by humans, but for Mimamsa, they were just not created. They were eternal, ever existing. The question is, when and why this particular defense of the Vedas arose? And several modern scholars have suggested that this defense looks like defense in opposition from the Buddhists who are saying, no, the Vedas are Paurusheya. Isayo, Mantra Kattaro, Isayo, Mantaram Katta. The Rishis are Mantra Kartrus. They are the makers of the, they are not, Vedas are not Paurusheya. They are man-made. The Rishis are human, the Vedas are made by the human being. And the Rishis are ignorant, as described in several Buddhist texts. So the Buddhists are criticizing the Vedas for being Paurusheya, created by ignorant, probably deceptive human beings. And the Mimamsakas are trying to fight that argument. Now, in the works of Kumarila, one finds further criticism of the Buddhists. One criticism says, how can we trust this teacher as the pure teacher of pure dharma? Look what he did. The Kshatriyas are never supposed to become teachers. That right belongs only to Brahmanas. Here is a Kshatriya who sort of abdicated his own Kshatriya role of ruling the kingdom, took over the role of becoming a teacher, which should belong only to Brahmanas. So he did something that is not worthy of a genuine Kshatriya. The second thing is that look at the language used by the Buddhists. They are pointing to probably some hybrid Sanskrit usage. It's not clear that Kumarila ever knew Pali. By the time of Kumarila, probably Pali was not known in India. And Kumarila says, look at the language. The language used by the Buddhist teachers, the Buddha himself, are apashabdas. They are deformed, substandard forms of language. If they cannot use even proper language, how can we trust them? So how can we treat them as pramana? So questioning the pramanya of the Buddhists is done in multiple ways by the Mimamsa. The other tradition I want to briefly look at is the tradition of Sanskrit grammarians. Again, Panini, my guess is he is slightly before the Buddha. Panini, I think, is also pre-Alexander, and there is nirvana, avate. The word nirvana comes in one rule, but the word nirvana doesn't necessarily mean there anything that it means in Buddhism. We don't know. Nirvana means satisfaction. Just a chakshu nirvanam. Nirvanam, Kalidasa uses this word, pure satisfaction, in sense that is not exactly the sense of Buddhist nirvana. So we come to Katyayana and Patanjali. Katyayana probably belongs during the Mauryan period. Patanjali comes slightly after the fall of the last Maurya king. What does Katyayana have to say? Katyayana exhibits his fear that the upper shabdas are going to overwhelm the shabdas. Shabda, proper shabdas. Sanskrit only are the proper shabdas. And upper shabdas are going to overwhelm. Therefore, protecting the shabdas emerges as a sort of the function of Sanskrit grammar. So, where do we see this? So, we have known Siddhe Shabdartha Sambandhe. The relationship between words and meanings is established by usage. It is Siddha Lokataha Artha Prayukte. People use it in the world to express meaning. What is the function of grammar? Shastrena Dharma Niyama. The Shastra, the grammatical Shastra, is considered to be doing Dharma Niyama. It tells us that merit is restricted only to proper usage of Sanskrit. Anything that's not proper Sanskrit does not generate merit. And so a division is made. It's not purely sort of secular correct versus incorrect, but meritorious versus non-meritorious, righteous versus non-righteous. Some morality, moral values are now associated with these. The second thing that Katyayana does is he associates proper use of Sanskrit, Shastranvita Shabda Prayoga, and he says this is meritorious because Tat Tulyam Veda Shabdena, the use of proper Sanskrit, Sanskrit backed by the Shastra of Panini, that sort of usage is Tat Tulyam Veda Shabdena in generating merit. And so again, Katyayana is highlighting this function of grammar as defining meritorious qualities of Sanskrit usage, and by exclusion saying other languages are apashabdas. Why do those people use those other languages? Katyayana is very clear. Katyayana says this is a Shakti, that they are not capable of speaking proper Sanskrit. So again, a kind of a perception of upper class speakers have the ability to speak properly, and other people in the society don't speak properly. Therefore, they speak improper forms of language, like what we would call them Prakrits in later times. So Ashakti is a reason given there. Now Patanjali gives us a few interesting stories, and it says it's not absolutely necessary that we speak proper Sanskrit everywhere. He says, okay, if you go to the marketplace, you can speak Prakrit, that's okay. So he has moved slightly away from Katyayana. But Patanjali says, during sacrifice, don't make any mistakes. Speak only proper Sanskrit, only Shuddha Sanskrit. And he says, look at these Rishis. And he cites story of this clan of Rishis. These Rishis have a funny name. The name is Yarvanas Tarvana. Yarvanas Tarvana is a kind of a language-based name. It's like calling some Karnataka speaker Yandu Gundu. That's like Yarvanas Tarvana. Why it's called Yarvanas Tarvana? Because they speak, instead of saying Yadvanaha, Tadvanaha, proper Sanskrit, they speak Yarvana Tarvana. So, that's why we call them Yarvanas Tarvana. But these Rishis, they call them Rishis, these were very smart. During the sacrifice, the Yarvanas Tarvana did not make mistakes. They spoke proper Sanskrit, and therefore they behaved properly. On the other hand, Patanjali says the Asuras. So again, Asura is a kind of a euphemistic term. Asura refers to opposite of Devas, but also those who opposed the Devas, and also those who don't speak proper Sanskrit. By extension, those who oppose Brahmanical religion. The term Asura gets kind of this extended meaning in later times. So what do the Asuras do? Patanjali says Asuras use improper language even during sacrifice. Yadye karmani taihi apabhashitam, and tataste parabhuta. Therefore, they were defeated by the gods. And so, Patanjali gives some interesting stories about how he felt about about proper usage and improper usage. Now, would one think that those were the views commonly accepted by everybody? Did the Buddhists have the same views? Did the Jains have the same views? Did the Mauryas have the same views? I would say, of course not. The Mauryas and the Jains and the Buddhists had their own exactly opposite linguistic views. So, what do we find in those traditions? So, just to look at a few expressions that we find in Buddhist and Jain tradition. The Buddhists, this doesn't go to canonical Buddhist texts, but Buddhaghosa. Magadhi refers to Pali as Magadhi, but Magadhi calls it Sabbasattanam Mula Bhasha.
Yes.
The words of Buddhaghosa, Magadhi is the original language of all beings, not even human beings. Sabbasattanam Mula Bhasha. That's the absolute origin. It's like a whole contestation with Sanskrit, Vedic, Apaurushayatva, Anaditva of Sanskrit. What do we find in the Jain text? So in Ardha Magadhi text, for example, the same question is asked. Okay. Kayaraye bhasaye deva bhasanti. In which language do the gods speak? The answer is absolutely clear. Ardha Magadhi bhasaye deva bhasanti. The gods speak in the Ardha Magadhi language. So, if the gods speak Ardha Magadhi, so here we see beautiful contestations. Deva Bhasha, Sanskrit, Deva Bhasha, Ardha Magadhi, Jains, seeing not exactly eye to eye. Now, Patanjali will have his own response to such things. He says, Brahmanena na mlechitavai na apabhashitavai. If you are a Brahmana, at least a Brahmana. So he's not advising anybody else. At least if you are a Brahmana, don't speak improperly. Speak proper Sanskrit. Na mlechitavai na apabhashitavai. Now, given such a linguistic divide, socio-linguistic divide, what happens to later Buddhism? So just quickly I want to talk about later forms of Buddhism which are expressed in Sanskrit, as the Sanskrit text we have from northern forms of Buddhism, both Hinayana traditions, Sarvastivada traditions, and Mahayana traditions. So just to look at a few passages from these northern texts. First thing, the Lalita Vistara, which is a Sanskrit biography of the Buddha. There is a chapter on Buddha's study of the scripts. And the Buddha goes to the classroom and teaches the teacher. And Buddha says, how many scripts do you know, teacher? And then that's a whole list. Buddha cites a whole list. So I know all these. Do you know any of these? So the teacher is kind of dumbfounded. And the Buddha said, okay, well, what is this alphabet? And the Buddha recites the Sanskrit alphabet. So clearly, it's Sanskrit. With all the A, I, O, all these sounds are there in the Sanskrit alphabet. Kya is there, Sanskrit alphabet. So Buddha is speaking Sanskrit. Lalita Vistara is a biography of a Sanskrit-speaking Buddha. So that's the first thing that we notice, that the Buddha himself now is made into a Sanskrit speaker. Now the question is, why did the Buddhists turn to writing in Sanskrit? And this is again a highly contested subject. And here we have a whole slew of scholars: Alex Raymond, David Ruegg, Vincent H. Singer, Johann N. Brockert, myself. I have written extensively about many of these topics. Again, there are some disagreements, but I'm expressing sort of my own view. I'm just to give you some of my own ideas. The one thing that I want to point out is authors of most of these Buddhist Sanskrit texts are Brahmins converted to Buddhism. We have their biographical details, mostly now translated into Tibetan, like Vasubandhu's biography and so on and so forth. Almost all of them, Maitreya, Vasubandhu, Asanga, almost all of these are originally Brahmins converted to Kshatriyas. And so there is a Brahman background. Secondly, they are writing in Sanskrit. Thirdly, they are thoroughly familiar with purely Paninian Sanskrit. This is a move away from hybrid Sanskrit. They are writing in absolutely Pakka Paninian Sanskrit. They are quoting Panini in discussing the word Pratitya Samutpada. The commentaries Thiramati, Chandra Kirti, they are quoting Panini's rules in debating these Buddhist technical terms. So why did the Buddhists turn to Sanskrit? Now, one is because patronage by the kings turned to Sanskrit. So we have some theories that Sarvastivada was given patronage by Kushan rulers in the northwest, and Ashwagosha is said to have been given patronage by the Kushan rulers. Again, these are theories. Most of these texts survived in the northwest, in the region that was ruled by the Kushans. So again, Kushan patronage is one possible reason. But the very fact that these are Brahmins converting to Buddhism is another important fact. Now, how does that show up? So it shows up in several stories told in these Sanskrit Buddhist texts. So again, going to Lalita Vistara. Lalita Vistara says that different Buddhas are born in different families on earth, but they always select either a Brahmin family or a Kshatriya family. And so Lalita Vistara is discussing how does the Bodhisattva is sitting in Tushita heaven and discussing in which kingdom, in which lineage should I be born. And Lalita Vistara says the Buddhas are born in a Kshatriya family when the Kshatriyas are dominant in the world. The Buddhas are born in a Brahmin family when the Brahmins are dominant. But they are never born in any other jati. So again, there is an interesting thought. So why is he not being born in the Kosala lineage? And says no. Because the Kosalas in their some previous birth were born in some other non-Brahmin, non-Kshatriya lineage. And so Buddha will not be born. That's okay. Kshatriyas, Brahmins contesting in which family will the Buddhas be born. At least in theory, the Brahmins could be dominating sometime. Though at this time, Kshatriyas were dominant. Therefore, the Buddha was born in the Shakya Kshatriya. That's one sort of interesting thing. Secondly, he says, in which mode should the Bodhisattva be born? In which mode should he enter the womb of his mother? So again, Lalita Vistara says, there is this Devaputra. Again, this conversation taking place in the Tushita heaven, and the Devaputra, his name is Ugra Tejas. Reminds me of the narrator in Mahabharata, Ugra Shravas. There is Ugra Tejas. And Ugra Tejas says the Bodhisattva must enter his mother's womb in that very form which has been described in the Mantra Veda Shastra of the Brahmanas. Fascinating passage. A Devaputra advising the Bodhisattva in which mode he should be born, and the passage says in the same mode in which the Mantra Veda Shastra of the Brahmanas describes the mode of being born. So again, I am just quoting a few of these passages. The last point I want to mention is a very interesting defense of non-standard linguistic use by the Buddhists themselves. And this is not the kind of defense that Lalita Vistara authors would make or Nagarjuna would make, but some other texts are making that defense. So, especially in several Tantra texts that are written in Sanskrit, the Buddha is called a Rishi. The language of the Buddha is called Arsha. So here we have an echo of what happens in Brahmanical texts, where the grammarians would say the usage of Panini is the standard Sanskrit that you can use, but the usage that we find in Ramayana, Mahabharata is Arsha. Wherever it differs from Panini, we cannot imitate that usage. Rishis can use those forms, but not use those forms. So those are Arshas. They are very similar terminology used in Jain texts, where Mahavira is sometimes called Isi, same word used in Pali, and Isi Bhashi, you have Isi Bhashi, the texts in Jainism, Isi Bhashitam, into discourses by Jain Munis, and here the words of the Buddha are like Rishi Bhashita, they are Arsha. So we cannot imitate, but Buddha used those, he is okay, he can use that. That was kind of one defense that we see in some texts. The other interesting defense I found in the commentary Vimala Prabha on Kalachakra Tantra. And I know that Shrikant Bhaulkar has been working on this Tantra, and occasionally I read these Tantras myself. I want to mention that in my 45 years of teaching Sanskrit at the University of Michigan, almost 99% of my students were students of Buddhist studies. 1% were students of Panini. So that was my first love. Panini was 1%, 99% my students studies. So I did Pali, Nagarjuna, Vasubandhu, Asranga, everything. That was my routine Sanskrit teaching beyond the sort of first year, second year, all that was Sanskrit. It's all Buddhist studies, Sanskrit. It was interesting. When I retired, at the ceremony for my retirement, my department had invited 3 of my students. They were all Buddhist studies students. All of them, every one of them. All my colleagues who spoke about me, Buddhist studies students. So, Vimala Prabha says the Buddha is using irregular, deviant forms of Sanskrit for a very special reason. Buddha does not want you to attach yourself. There is some sort of nairatmik, even in language. Do not attach yourself, even to language. Don't be greedy. Don't attach yourself. Anasakti for language. So to teach you anasakti to language, the Buddha is using these kinds of non-standard forms. There is a very special purpose in teaching such forms. The very last point I want to make is that I sort of briefly mentioned the Mauryans, the Kushanas, the royal dynasties, Chandragupta giving possibly patronage to the Jains, the kings in Karnataka and Rajasthan giving Gujarat, giving patronage to Jains, is a very important phenomenon in preservation, propagation of languages and literatures. So, especially when we see these claims about Pali, Mool Sarva Sattana Moola Bhasha, similar claim by the Jains. The great British scholar, K.R. Norman, just wonderful. I try to memorize his research papers, they're so wonderful. If you want to work on Prakrit, Ashokan inscription, you cannot do any research without studying K.R. Norman. It's so important. And K.R. Norman, in one place, points out this parallelism in what happens in Ashokan inscriptions. Norman says that the template of Ashokan inscriptions, where was it produced? It was obviously produced in Magadha, in Pataliputra. That was the capital of of Ashoka's kingdom. Ashoka probably spoke Magadhi as his mother tongue. That was the Rajabhasha of his kingdom. The original template in Magadhi was sent to the periphery of his empire and then converted to local Prakrit and ultimately to Greek and Aramaic, the regions of Afghanistan. But the original template was in Magadhi. So Magadhi, the original, being converted to other languages, is a model which forms, at least theoretically, the basis for what Buddha Ghosh is saying about Pali, that Pali is the Sampasaddhana Mudava. Of course, that's a kind of a theological claim, and yet there is some sort of an interesting parallelism. So, political patronage, political power is as important to survival, propagation, importance of various languages, and why particular religious traditions, why particular branches of Buddhism adopted Sanskrit, why Pali survived in Sri Lanka, but Pali disappeared in India. It's kind of an interesting topic to study. Why does Pali disappear in India? Pali was recovered during the colonial period. Even the opponents of Buddhism, Shankara, opposing, there is no trace of any Pali texts by the time of Shankaracharya. Pali texts are not found in India. They are found in Sri Lanka. They were brought into India, and I'm so happy how Pali studies are now prospering and how the legacy of Mr. Dadphale is prospering at the University of Pune, my alma mater. And so here I want to end my speech. It is exactly 12 o'clock midnight in California, and I don't want to stretch the time for Ashok and Vidyut and Ruta, because they are on my time. In Pune, it's probably 12 o'clock daytime. Here it is turning into just midnight, exactly 12 o'clock midnight. So, Mahesh ji, Lata, thank you so much for inviting me. Dadphale family, Nalutai, Shruti, Ruta, I'm so thankful you thought of me. This is a great honor. I'm so happy that you gave me this honor. And I want to thank all the audience that is spread across this internet. I see Vidyut is still awake. Not only
Yeah.
Vidyut, I have to tell you an interesting thing. Shubhangi is still awake.
Yes.
Normally, whenever I give a talk at this hour, she is fast asleep. But tonight, she is still awake. So I have to thank her. She has kept me awake. Okay.
अशोकही आहे इथे.
Ashok is awake. Wow.
दोघंही आहोत आम्ही. एकत्र येऊन
Amazing.
बसतो खोलीत.
I think Ruta went to bed. Looks like.
So should you now.
It's
पण ह्या संपूर्ण समारंभाला आम्हाला दोघांनाही आमंत्रित केल्याबद्दल आम्हालाही फार बरं वाटलं आणि येऊ शकलो. माधवचं सुंदर भाषण ऐकू शकलो आणि सरांच्या आठवणीमध्ये रमू शकलो. या सगळ्याबद्दल आम्हाला खूप खूप बरं वाटतंय. नलुताई, श्रुती, रीता आणि सगळ्या लोकांना लता आणि महेश विशेषतः आमचे धन्यवाद.
आणि या प्रकाशनाची एक एक प्रत मला पाठवा.
Thank you very much. Let me thank Professor Madhav Deshpande for such a wonderful talk. And I think this was most fitting tribute to Professor Dadphale's work as a scholar in the field of Sanskrit, Pali. And he was so fond of languages. And today, can you please mute your mics. Yeah, thank you. So on this occasion, I mean, there would not have been a better tribute than this particular talk which Professor Deshpande has delivered today. I think all these topics were also close to Professor Dharphale's heart. I still remember, I mean, his comment on Sakaya Niruttiya, and he says that if Sakaya Niruttiya would have meant your own languages, then Buddha probably would have said Sakaya Sakaya Niruttiya, and he used to immediately translate into Marathi, Apapल्या भाषेत शिका. And he said Buddha said Sakaya Niruttiya, that means आपल्या भाषेत, and he used to kind of he was in that camp who believed that Sakaya Nirutti means Buddha's own language, that is Magadhi, like what Buddhaghosa said. So yes, thank you very much for reminding, I mean, or bringing back all those memories of Professor Dharphale. I mean, there are so many occasions, and every time you think of something, and suddenly he comes to your mind. Thank you very much. As you already said, it's midnight in North America, and here it's past afternoon, mid-noon. So there's not much time left, but as Mandarji has expressed his wish to propose a vote of thanks. In fact, I was to give propose a vote of thanks, but now I honor his request and allow him to say a few words about the program and his feelings, because he was a very close and dear son-in-law of Professor Dharphale. I remember him often mentioning and talking about Mandarji. So Mandarji, please, yeah, mic is yours.
सुहृदहो, खरं तर ही कृतज्ञतेची अभिव्यक्ती मी माझ्या स्वतःतर्फे करणार नसून संपूर्ण धडफळे कुटुंबियांतर्फे मी ही कृतज्ञता व्यक्त करावी अशी इच्छा श्रीमती नलिनीताई धडफळे यांनी व्यक्त केली. आणि मी जे काय बोलणार आहे ते बहुशः त्यांचंच मनोगत आहे, ते त्यांच्याच तोंडून ऐकायला आपल्याला आवडलं असतं, पण अशा प्रसंगी मन जेव्हा भावुकतेने भरून येतं तेव्हा बोलणं अशक्य होतं. हे समजून घेऊन मी तुमच्या वतीनं हे मनोगत त्यांचंच व्यक्त करणार आहे. मी आभार प्रदर्शन करणार हे माहिती होण्याआधी देवकर सरांनी अशी विनंती केली होती की मी धडफळे सरांच्या काही आठवणी सांगाव्यात. उशीर झाला असला तरी प्रत्यक्ष आभार अभिव्यक्तीपूर्वी मी सरांच्या 2-3 आठवणी सांगण्याचा मोह मला आवडत नसल्यामुळे सांगतो. एक डॉक्टर म्हणून एक अत्यंत आश्चर्यकारक गोष्ट म्हणजे नाकात नळ्या घातलेल्या, घरीच बायपॅप नावाचा व्हेंटिलेटर लावलेला, अशा अवस्थेत धडफळे सरांनी त्यांच्या निधनापूर्वी अगदी काही दिवसच आधी भाषा कोविदाचा अकाली अस्त हा टिमोवीचे संस्कृत विभाग प्रमुख श्रीपाद भट यांच्यावरचा एक मृत्यूलेख हा स्वतःच्या पत्नीला डिक्टेट केला आणि सकाळमध्ये तो छापूनही आला होता. तो वाचून कोणालाही असं वाटलं नसतं की हा लेख लिहिणारा विद्वान स्वतः मृत्यूशय्येवर आहे. त्यांच्या निधनाच्या आधी अगदी 5-6 दिवस मला त्यांनी अचानक बोलवून घेतलं आणि राजकवी काळेले यांच्या काही कविता मला वाचून दाखवल्या. त्यात काही अगदी गमतीदार शृंगारिक अशा सुद्धा कविता होत्या आणि स्वतःची मरणासन्न अवस्था विसरून अतिकतेने मला श्रुतीच्या बाबांनी त्या कविता सादर करून दाखवल्या. नाकात नळी असताना केलेला त्यांचा तो अभिनय मी कधीच विसरू शकणार नाही. प्राचीन भाषेचे विद्वान म्हणल्यावर आपल्या मनात जी एक गंभीर वृक्ष प्रतिमा येते तिच्यापेक्षा धडफळे सरांचं व्यक्तिमत्व अगदी वेगळं होतं. त्यांच्यात एक व्यासंगी विद्वान आणि एक खट्याळ बालक अशा 2 परस्पर विरोधी वाटणाऱ्या व्यक्तिरेखांचा संगम झाला होता. मी वाटणाऱ्या म्हणलं कारण त्या व्यक्तिरेखा मुळात परस्पर विरोधी नव्हत्याच आणि नसतातच. कारण सरांमधल्या बालकाची जिज्ञासा, कुतूहल, एक निर्भय आणि पूर्वग्रहमुक्त अशी शोधक वृत्ती, फिअरलेस अँड अनबायस्ड हंगर फॉर एक्सप्लोरेशन ही त्यांच्यातल्या व्यासंगी विद्वानाला पूरक आणि पोषक ठरली होती. तसंच खरा अभ्यासू विद्वान हा स्वतःला विशाल ज्ञानसागरापुढे लहान आणि छोटाच समजू लागतो. जितका अधिकाधिक कळू लागतं तितका त्याच्यातला लहानपणाच वाढत जातो, त्याच्यातला अहंभाव विरून जातो. बडे जावा ज्याला तो चले जाओ म्हणतो. आणि सर अशा अर्थाने शेवटपर्यंत एक मनानी बालकच राहिले, ते पक्के किंवा बंचुके कधी झाले नाहीत. त्यांची श्रीमंती खूप वेगळी होती. वॉल टू वॉल वॉर्डरोब हे श्रीमंतीचं लक्षण मानलं जातं, पण सरांच्या घरी वॉल टू वॉल वर्डरोब होते. पुस्तकांनी भरलेली कपाटं होती. चोरावर मोर हा वाक्प्रचार कसा आला तर तमिळ भाषेत चोर म्हणजे भात आणि मोर म्हणजे दही, तर चोरावर मोर म्हणजे साधं भातावर दही, आणि म्हणूनच मराठीत अर्धवट लागलेल्या दह्याला अधमोर दही म्हणतात. अशा भाषिक गमती ते सांगून आम्हाला मंत्रमुग्ध करून टाकायचे. प्राच्यविद्येतलं मला काही कळत नाही हे सगळ्यांनाच माहिती आहे, पण एवढं मला नक्की जाणवतं की प्राचीन भारतीय संस्कृतीचा सरांनी जो व्यापक अर्थ लावला होता त्या अर्थाची आज खूप गरज आहे. प्राचीन आणि अर्वाचीन, पौर्वात्य आणि पाश्चात्य, सनातनी आणि पुरोगामी अशा विविध डायकोटॉमीज मधलं रिकन्सिलिएशन, विरोधाभासांमधली सांगड ही घालणाऱ्या समन्वयवादी अशा विद्वानांची आज खूप गरज आहे. आणि त्यामुळेच सरांची उणीव आज मलाच नाही, आपल्याला सगळ्यांना नाही तर देशालाही जाणवते की जेव्हा समन्वयाची अतिशय गरज आपल्याला सगळ्यांना जाणवते. विद्वान आणि बालक यांच्यातला एक सामायिक गुण म्हणजे रसिकता. लहान मुलाची रसिकता उत्स्फूर्त, इन्स्टिंक्टिव्ह असते आणि विद्वानाची रसिकता ही अभ्यासातनं आलेली म्हणजे कल्टिवेटेड असते. सरांमध्ये या दोन्ही रसिकवृत्ती होत्या. सरांचं खाण्यावर किती प्रेम होतं याचा उल्लेख झालाच आहे, पण खाण्या इतकं सरांचं गाण्यावरही प्रेम होतं. भगवान दादांची अलबेली गाणी, सूर्ययाची गीतं, बेगम अख्तरच्या गझला हे सरांचे विशेष आवडीचे गायन प्रकार होते. योगायोग असा की सरांच्या निधनापूर्वी फक्त 2-3 दिवस बेगम अख्तरच्या गझला मी त्यांना ऐकवल्या आणि त्या ऐकण्यात सर अगदी रमून गेल्याची आठवण अजूनही माझ्या मनात ताजी आहे. त्यातली शेवटची गझल होती, जाने क्यों आज तेरे नाम पे रोना आया. हीच आज आपल्या सगळ्यांची भावना असणार आहे याची मला खात्री आहे. आजचा पुस्तक विमोचन सोहळा संपन्न होण्यासाठी सर्वात सिंहाचा वाटा हा अर्थातच डॉक्टर महेश देवकर आणि डॉक्टर सौ लता देवकर यांनी उचललाय. डॉक्टर देवकर हे गेली काही वर्ष या फुले पुणे विद्यापीठाच्या पाली भाषेचं विभाग प्रमुख पद भूषवत आहेत. त्यांच्या नेतृत्वाखाली या विभागाची उत्तम प्रगती चालू आहे. पाली भाषा विषयाचं विशेष अध्ययन केंद्र व्हावं, त्यासाठी स्वतंत्र इमारत व्हावी असा त्यांचा प्रयत्न. त्या प्रयत्नात सारनाथ इथल्या विषयक अभ्यासातून तिथून आपलं हे बदलून स्थान पुण्याला आलेल्या त्यांच्या पत्नी डॉक्टर सौ लता देवकर यांची त्यांना साथ लाभली आहे. देवकर दंपतीची अभ्यासू आणि जिज्ञासू वृत्ती, त्यांची विद्वत्ता याचं सरांच्या बोलण्यात नेहमी मनापासून कौतुक आम्हाला ऐकू येत असे. आपल्या प्रचंड कामातून वेळ काढून त्यांनी हे पुस्तक साकारण्यासाठी किती मेहनत घेतली याचा एक आढावा आपण लता देवकर यांच्या वक्तव्यात ऐकलाच आहे. त्याबद्दल आम्ही त्यांचे सदैव ऋणी आहोत. पाली भाषा विभागाच्या उन्नतीच्या कार्यात देवकर सरांना भक्कम पाठबळ लाभले डॉक्टर श्रीकांत भोलकर सरांचं. आणि या निमित्ताने देवकर सरांनी ज्याचा उल्लेख केला त्या दुहेरी बहुमानाचा पुनरुल्लेख करताना मला अतिशय आनंद होतोय. जगप्रसिद्ध ऑक्सफर्ड विद्यापीठाची बहुमानाची वरिष्ठ फेलोशिप आणि श्री ग माझगावकर भाषा पुरस्कार हे 2 सन्मान नुकतेच भोलकर सरांना मिळालेत. आपल्या सर्वांतर्फे या निमित्त भोलकर सरांना मानवंदना.
मी त्यांना घेते. आईतर्फे आहे आणि आमच्या सगळ्यांतर्फे.
सरांना एक पुष्पगुच्छ श्रुती अर्पण करते आम्हा सर्वांतर्फे आणि तिच्या आईतर्फे. डॉक्टर मोहन धडफळे स्मृती व्याख्यानमाला सुरू करावी ही देवकर दंपतीचीच कल्पना होती आणि या व्याख्यानमालेचं पहिलं पुष्प गुंफण्यासाठी आज डॉक्टर माधव देशपांडे हे सरांचे विद्यार्थी मित्र हे आपल्याला लाभले हे आमचं भाग्य आहे. माधव देशपांडे सरांचे औपचारिक आभार मानण्यापेक्षा त्यांच्या ऋणानुबंधात राहणंच आम्ही पसंत करू. आजच्या कार्यक्रमात धडफळे सरांच्या आठवणींना उजाळा दिला तो त्यांचे एक स्नेही डॉक्टर अशोक अकलूजकर आणि सरांच्या पहिल्या बॅचच्या विद्यार्थिनी डॉक्टर विद्युत अकलूजकर यांनी साता समुद्रा पार आणि टाइम झोन वेगळा असताना सुद्धा या सर्वांबद्दल आम्ही अतिशय कृतज्ञ आहोत. या पुस्तकाचं मुद्रण, सुशोभीकरण, इतर तांत्रिक बाजू सांभाळणारे विनायक छत्रे आणि त्यांच्यासारखे इतर अनेक जण या सर्वांचे आम्ही ऋणी आहोत. आजच्या पुस्तक विमोचनाचं औचित्य साधून सरांवर मनापासून प्रेम करणारे सरांचे लाडके विद्यार्थी डॉक्टर पद्माकर प्रभुणे यांनी कालच्या दैनिक महाराष्ट्र टाइम्समध्ये प्राच्य विद्येचे संमोहक भाषा प्रभू हा अप्रतिम गौरव लेख लिहिलाय. आपल्यापैकी ज्यांना अजूनही वाचता आला नसेल त्यांनी जरूर वाचावा. आपल्या प्रभूविषयी प्रभुणे यांनी नाही लिहायचं तर कोणी, तर हा एक सुंदर योगायोग जुळवून आणल्याबद्दल प्रभुणे सरांनाही मनपूर्वक धन्यवाद. आजच्या विमोचन सोहळ्याला प्रसिद्धी देणाऱ्या सर्व वृत्तपत्र आणि प्रसारमाध्यम प्रतिनिधींचे आम्ही आभार मानतो. शेवटी पुनश्च एकदा डॉक्टर महेश आणि डॉक्टर सौ लता देवकर यांचा उल्लेख करणं आवश्यक आहे. मी श्रुतीला विनंती करतो की आमच्या कृतज्ञतेचं एक प्रतीक म्हणून पुष्पगुच्छ त्यांना अर्पण करावे. मला नलिनीताईंनी आवर्जून सांगितलंय बरं का देवकर सर, की या कार्यक्रमाच्या निमित्ताने अकलूजकर पती-पत्नी आणि माधवदादा देशपांडे अशा 3 जगदविख्यात विद्वानांना एकाच आभासी व्यासपीठावर आणण्याचा एक मोठा संयोग आपण घडवून आणलाय. याबद्दल आपलं विशेष अभिनंदन आहे. या कार्यक्रमात प्रत्यक्षात आणि व्हर्च्युअली अशा सहभागी झालेल्या सर्वांचे मनपूर्वक आभार. धन्यवाद.
खूप खूप धन्यवाद. खरं तर आता बोलायला शब्द नाहीत. इट इज सच अन इमोशनल ऑकेजन that I think it is better to stop here with the memories of our teacher. सगळ्यांच्याच मनात आता ह्या भावना आहेत आमच्या सगळ्यांच्या, की कृतज्ञतेची भावना, की ज्या गुरूंनी आपल्याला अनेक गोष्टी दिल्या. सरांनी माझं ते पीएचडीचे गाईड होते, पण त्या गाईडशी व्यतिरिक्त त्यांनी खूप दिलं. म्हणजे त्यांच्याबरोबर काही माझं थिसिसचं घेऊन गेलो तपासायला, की ते म्हणाले हा ठीक आहे, ते तर बाजूला ठेवा, मी ते नंतर बघतो, आपण दुसऱ्या कुठेतरी काहीतरी दुसऱ्या विषयावर सुरू करायचंय. त्यामुळे माझ्या थिसिस बद्दल आम्ही खूप कमी बोललो आणि ह्या इतर विषयांबद्दलच आम्ही नेहमी खूप बोलत राहायचो आणि त्यातनं खूप शिकायला मिळायचं. ऑब्व्हियसली सरांनी जे काही थोडंसं शिकवलं त्यातलं काही वारसा जरी आम्हाला पुढे नेता आला हे काम, तरी मी म्हटलं की आमच्या हातून खूप काही घडलं आणि सरांना खऱ्या अर्थाने ते मानवंदना ठरेल असं वाटतं. मगाशी मंदारीजींनी उल्लेख केला, सरांमध्ये इतकी एक ती सहृदयता होती. मगाशी त्यांनी उल्लेख केला की ते किती सगळ्याच्या पलीकडे होते, कुठल्याही इझमच्या वादाच्या. आम्ही त्यांचे एक आर्टिकल वाचत असताना एक त्यांचं आर्टिकल मला आठवतं आता पटकन, की राम जन्मभूमीचा जो सगळा वाद चालू होता त्या काळात सरांनी एक वाक्य लिहिलंय छान, की रामाचं जन्मभूमी शोधण्यापेक्षा रामराज्य कसं येईल हे शोधलं पाहिजे. तर ही अशा पद्धतीची त्यांची जी काही भूमिका होती एक मानवतेची, आणि त्याच्यात तो विचार सतत त्यांच्या मनात होता, की एक मानवतेचा विचार त्यांच्या जो मनात होता आणि सगळ्यांना एक काहीतरी एक चांगलं जीवन मिळावं, चांगलं आयुष्य मिळावं, चांगले विचार, सगळे हे वादविवाद युद्ध ही नसावीत. आणि त्या सगळ्यातनं जो समन्वयाचा आपण जे बोललो, की तो समन्वयाचा शोध ते सतत घेत राहिले आणि त्यातून नेहमी सुंदरतेचा, चांगल्याचा आस्वाद आणि चांगल्याचा पुरस्कार ते सतत करत राहिले. तर हे त्यांच्या अगदी शेवटपर्यंत मी सरांकडे गेल्यानंतर अनेक वेळा त्यांच्या घरी मी म्हटलं असं की अनेक गोष्टी ज्या केल्या त्याच्याने सरांच्याकडे गाणं म्हणणं त्यांच्या त्या फर्ग्युसन कॉलेजच्या आवारातल्या घरामध्ये मला अजूनही आठवतं. तर मी, अजय राव, आम्ही सरांचे विद्यार्थी, खूप त्यांच्याबरोबरचे दिवस आणि क्षण आठवतात. आज सरांच्या या स्मृती जागवताना त्यांचे सर्व स्नेही, मग त्याच्यामध्ये अगदी अरुण बर्वे आहेत, प्रतिभा पिंगळे आहेत, त्याच्यानंतर सरांचे लाडके प्रकाशक कुर्जेकर आहेत, ते जॉईन झालेत, अनेक मंडळी जॉईन झालेत, पालीच्या क्षेत्रातले अनेक विद्वान, विमलेंद्र कुमार BHU वरनं, अंगराज चौधरींचा मगाशी मी उल्लेख केला, त्याच्यानंतर C उपेंद्रराव JNU मधनं, हैदराबादहून KC सुरी, अनेक मंडळी सामील झालेली आहेत या व्हर्च्युअल प्लॅटफॉर्म मध्ये. आणि सरांच्या स्मृतींना आपण सगळ्यांनी मिळून जे अभिवादन केलं, आमच्याबरोबर त्यासाठी सामील झालात, तेव्हा सर्वांचे खूप खूप मनपूर्वक आभार. Yes. So I thank all the people who have joined it, and now we will conclude today's program with Shruti's words. So Shruti ताई बोला, अनम्यूट करा.
सर्वांना माझी मनापासून आग्रहाचं निमंत्रण आहे. आईच्या बरोबर आता, म्हणजे आई आता आमच्या बरोबर राहते, तर कधीही पुण्याला आलात किंवा कधीही वेळ असेल पुण्यातल्या लोकांना, तेव्हा जरूर तिला भेटायला या. तिला खूप आवडेल सगळ्यांना प्रत्यक्ष भेटायला. आता निर्बंधही उठलेले आहेत. तिची दोन्ही वॅक्सिनेशन्सही झालेली आहेत. त्यामुळे जरूर या आणि भेटून खूप आनंद होईल. हे एक सांगायचं होतं. आणि कदाचित शेवटी भरतवाक्य हे संस्कृत नाटकामध्ये म्हणतात. तर त्या भरतवाक्याने आपण आज सांगता करूया 2 सेकंदात. मास्तु मास्तु चिरविरह व्रतम् सदा भवतु नः प्रियजन संगतम् प्रियजन संगतम् सदा भवतु नः प्रियजन संगतम् प्रियजन संगतम्. धन्यवाद.
Thank you very much. And with these, we conclude today's program and conclude this meeting. Those who are really willing to buy these books, so please feel free to contact the department or the Deshana through the email addresses and information shared. Looking forward to having you again with us. With these words, thank you all. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much. Atmosphere sir, Deshpande sir, सगळ्यांना खूप खूप आभार, खूप खूप धन्यवाद. Thank you.